Welcome back to the Dog Gone Wrong podcast, where myself and others share their mistakes and help you lift the guilt burden. I'm your host, Sarah Roper, the multi-dog maven. Hello, welcome to episode 50. We got here. I'm proud of myself, if I'm really honest. Weekly episodes through a lot of changes. So today I wanted to share with you just a few clips of some, not all, of my favourite conversations over the last 49 episodes. And yeah, there's some fab stuff in there, but I just wanted to kind of recap, my life is very different to when I started this, and I think I launched the first 3 episodes at once, and that, I think off the top of my head, that was the 16th of July 24. I was working as part of the Restart Dog Project in a prison at the time, a few days a week, self-employed and running my own business, Multi-Dog Maven, which, I'm still running my business, but the rest of my life, or at least my working life, looks quite different now. The days got reduced, just change of circumstances and stuff. With Restart, I started looking for other options. I needed to get ready to kind of go employed to get a mortgage and adult for a while. And I'd managed to secure a job in France, which was going to be week on, week off. So a week away in France and a week back. I lasted, 3-4 days, if that? Because I'd secured a second interview, like an in-person interview, with an assistance dog charity. So I quit that job and came back for the interview and thankfully got it. And in the last week, or 2 weeks, I think, maybe, I've passed my 6-month probation in my role, which I am absolutely loving, working with lots of great assistance dogs, puppies before they go in for training, and qualified assistance dogs, and helping support them and their clients and socialisers. And I am absolutely loving it. It's made it harder with the transition of jobs to do kind of weekly episodes, I have to say. I think I'm more settled now. I kind of know where I'm at, but it's also kind of woke me up to, enjoying life more rather than it all being about work. I still offer one-to-ones. I'm still running my wonderful membership, which I absolutely adore, but I'm not chasing my tail all the time, and I'm enjoying working my own dogs again, competing with them, training them, running the turbo training calls with the crew, my membership, and being organised enough to ask guests on as being a lot harder, at least this year, since I've started with the new job. So we will come on to a few clips of some of my favourite conversations, and then I will tell you a bit more about the plan moving forward towards the end. So we'll start with, this is episode 3, and it's Claire Lawrence, and she's of the award-winning High Peak Dogs and Reactive Dog Training.
Main mistakes that I've made was really, really difficult because I have made many, and I'll openly admit that I've made many, and I think that is a reason why professionals are so good in the end, because they make so many mistakes and learn from it. The first thing that came to my head was, what is one of the biggest mistakes you've made with your journey on dogs? I initially said I've been too harsh, but actually, when I delved into that a little bit deeper, I wanted to flip that on its side and say that actually sometimes I've been too soft as well, and I think the whole combination of both ends of the spectrum have created major problems for me in the past, from the likes of, dogs biting, dogs really heavily reacting, having no resilience, being too soft and not creating that confidence in the dog, because I've mothered them and I've been like, oh, don't get hurt, and they've never learned that. So the spectrum was really wide while I was trying to pinpoint something. So maybe we could, I don't know if you've got any questions just on that little part.
So
that might help me.
I know where you're going, but give me examples where you think you've been too harsh.
Right. So I think Digger has to come into this, because Digger has, can you see these grey hairs? Mm-hmm. Those on YouTube, those grey hairs appearing. Digger was a very troubled dog as a puppy. He was kept in a stable until he was 17 weeks old. He hadn't seen the world. He came from working strain backgrounds, which meant he wanted to hunt and he wanted to kill. And me being a German Shepherd owner, this bundle of ginger madness created some real
Border Terrier for the listeners.
Yeah, sorry, the Border Terrier. this chaotic being, very different to what I was used to, was wanting to hurt the other dogs in the household quite severely. We've all had bite marks off us honours from him. And I found myself getting more and more frustrated and more stressed, and as a result his life became more restricted. As it stands, like, he wasn't technically my dog, he was the guys that I was living with, but I ended up looking after him. And I just remember all of those feelings of stress and overwhelm and really not knowing what to do with this dog. He was very difficult to live with. He was very aggressive, and I just did not understand him. So in terms of my harshness, I think the harshness came from a fear of what he might do. So I escalated my verbiage. Like, when I thought definitely when he was fighting, I would be like grabbing his collar and trying to choke him off the dog. And I'll be honest, I have used lead corrections with that dog. If ever I thought he was gonna start going, back in the days when I knew less, I was like, stop it, and I'd pull him back on the lead. And I was just such a harsh handler with him, beyond what I really needed to be.
Do you think, sorry, I wanted to chip in there anyway. Do you think that with him, like, what stage of your journey to being a dog trainer, what stage were you at when that was happening?
So this was the thing, because like, I'd been through this with Titan, who was my first German Shepherd, and the guy I was with then was way harsh with him, to the point where he would take him into the back of the van and beat him, that he would yell. And I always said, there is a better way. And so then I got Skye, and I went through the positive reinforcement journey with Skye. She, as you know, is a dream dog. She was put on this earth to please people. She has...
I love that girl. Love her.
And she still is to this day. She has no conflict or desire to want to fall out with anybody. So she was really easy to train. And as much as I love her and as much as an angel she is, she taught me nothing. She did. She taught me how to learn. She taught me how to treat train. But then on the polar opposites of that, I then get this dog who wants to fight, who, if you waved a treat in front of his nose, said, nah, I want to nail this instead. Really, like, professionally, I wasn't. It was the very early stages, because I think there's like 6 months between Digger and Skye.
Mm-hmm.
So effectively, I thought I knew more than I did, because I trained a dog in inverted commas.
And it was working.
And she was amazing, I was like, so yeah, really, I had no qualifications back then, and I knew the very basics. Mm-hmm. I knew how to learn, I knew how to train a sit, I knew how to do a down, I knew how to do heel work or loose lead walking. Psychology, rehab, aggression, didn't have a clue.
No. Do you think that having Skye, as in, you'd had Titan, I know Titan's story, do you think after all of that with Titan, which was, horrific at times, and then getting Skye, and she was essentially an out-of-the-box dog. Yes, you put work in, of course you did, but that gave you that confidence. And then when Digger came along, it was more frustrating that he, that probably added to, the fact that you got an under-socialized puppy. He was being aggressive. He was, he was frustrating you anyway. But do you think that the previous 6 months with Skye, having the two polar opposites, was adding to that frustration and making you harsher?
1,000%. Like I said, I think that the fear of what he could do and seeing what he could do, it made me scared, so that I escalated my corrections, because I didn't want that to happen. No. I didn't want my dogs to get injured and bitten, and it really was a frustrating place to be, because one, I'd never experienced that level of aggression before. I'd experienced the noise with Titan. I'd experienced the defensive side. Get away from me! I don't want you near me. I had never experienced the more offensive dog that wanted to get in the thick of it. Was quite happy ripping stuff to shreds.
Yeah.
And that's scary when you haven't experienced that. So yes, it was frustrating. Yes, it was very stressful. And I said I would never go through it again. Maybe we'll talk about Dot later. Yeah, I mean, I think I would have known back then that terriers could be more feisty, and that they have a more of a desire to go. But did I? I think he was definitely easier to manage, if we put it in that terms. But I'm not sure whether I just saw this absolute nightmare on the end of the lead that I in all honesty, I just wanted to get rid of. I don't think size was a massive factor in that. No.
What stopped you getting rid of him?
The fact that the rescue centre didn't pick the phone up. Yeah, it really got to that point. I mean, we must have done 18 months of just managing. You know, I did the typical thing of making all the mistakes that everybody makes. I've got this dog who is scrapping, and I think, oh well, it just might have been an error. We'll try again tomorrow, and I'll keep him on the lead. And all right, well, that's not working. I mean, the fights were daily. It was horrific. Right now, you go in your crate, you segregate from the dogs, you go out on your own, and ultimately, the isolation for him became more and more. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, there's just so much to think about with it. I've forgotten the question again.
Why didn't you get rid of him? That was the question.
Well, thank you. I just thought I could deal with it on my own, but I couldn't. And yeah, it got to the point where it was like, I can't do this anymore. And I did. I called the rescue centre up, and they didn't answer. And then I think me as a person, I was like, right, we've just had a bad day. Go out there again tomorrow and try again. But I must have called the rescue centre at least twice. I even pretended to call the police on Digger when he was being an idiot, because by this point I was learning to read him. He taught me so much. I was learning to see when he was eyeballing another dog, and I was learning to see when he was walking in the room nice and loose and then he'd go stiff, and I'd start to catch him in those places opposed to going, this has come out of nowhere and he's hanging off another dog, you know. So we learnt together. I think we learnt a lot together, and now when I look at him, I'm really grateful that they didn't pick up, you know. But yeah, I did pretend to call the police on him. I'm like, Digger, stop being naughty, I'll call a policeman. And yes, so yeah, I am pleased I didn't get rid of him, but I would never want to go through that again, which is why when Dot came along, as soon as I realised that she was a much bigger version of Digger, and I was back in that place, I think that's why I found it so stressful, that ultimately I ended up having a little bit of a breakdown. So yeah.
Was that a trauma response, do you think?
100%.
Because of Digger, yeah.
And I didn't see it at the time. It wasn't until she went away to the dog walkers. And for any of the listeners, you know, if you have a dog like this, we do know what it's like. We do know that the stress that these dogs can trigger and the emotions that it can bring up. And it wasn't until the dog walker took her out and took her away for just a few days to give me a break that I went, she is restirring all of those emotions that I thought I'd got rid of and that I thought I'd worked through with Digger. And she's brought them all the way back up to the surface again. Except this time she's a much bigger dog and she wants to bite people, not dogs. Yeah. That was tough.
I loved that conversation with Claire, and she's already agreed to come on again. So there's a spoiler that the podcast is not ending. And funnily enough, literally a few days before I recorded this, Claire drove down to me and we went on a lovely carriage drive, and she brought Digger, who you will have heard about just there. Digger is now 13, and he's never been on a carriage in his life, and we went on a nearly 11-mile drive, or it was around 11 miles anyway, 10 point something or 11 point something, and he was a superstar. There was dogs going by, or we were passing dogs, and he just watched the world go by. He was a real superstar. Just took to it like he'd always been on a carriage, which was just fab. You will have heard me talk about Claire as well in one of the more recent episodes, a couple of episodes ago, launching her book. You can still grab that. Please go and grab that, because, yeah, it's a brilliant book. I can't say enough. Okay, so we'll move on to my next fave episode, which was episode 4. Nando Brown. Nando is one of the duo that is the School of Canine Science, teaching dog trainers and behaviourists all they need to know to be and do better.
So a lot of dog trainers get into it because they they need to work with a dog. They need to work through problems with a dog. Mine were just very extreme. So my first dog was super easy, super simple. I mean, I made copious amounts of mistakes. I got her from a traveller community, met up with someone in a lay-by, picked up a little staffy, and she was super simple, super social, like dogs, like people. I could take her down. I was that guy walking down the road with no dog on, no lead on.
You were
like she'd come into the pub. Yeah, like she was just so easy. And then my first mistake that bit me in the arse, let's say, was my second dog, and that was a Cane Corso. I remember having my Staffy Minky and going, well, this is easy. I'll get another one. And I got a Corso. Oh, that was just a catalogue of errors. I made every mistake in the book.
Give me some examples.
Okay, so start at the top. I found the breeder in a Exchange and Mark magazine. I then went to the house and all the alarm bells were ringing. Like, the place stank of piss. The puppies were in the front room and the mum was outside behind the French doors. But she was screaming at the doors, trying to get at me when I walked into the room. And I was a bit like, whoa, that's a big dog. And the breeder was like, oh, no, it's okay. She's just protective of her pups. And I was like, well, I suppose that makes sense, you know? So I then looked at the puppies all playing in the middle of the floor. And I went, that one's nice and quiet. That one that's tucked away behind the sofa. I went, oh, kind of like, I know he's going to be big, but... I want a dog that's going to keep itself out of the way and be quiet. And the breeder kind of looked at me and went, yeah, you take that one, mate.
Sucker.
Yeah. So I took the wrong puppy out the litter. Then I just under-socialised it, or socialised him inappropriately. And then I didn't know about the body language properly. So when I thought he was just a bit shy, I didn't realise that was going to turn into defensive aggression. He then started like grabbing people's clothes and pinning dogs to the floor. And I started looking for help. So the next series of mistakes that I made with that dog was looking for dog trainers, assuming that somebody that was on the television was the be all and end all, and not realizing what made a good dog trainer. Like that brings up a whole tangent that's more relevant to dog trainers than it is to dog owners. But I was passed around from trainer to trainer. And then eventually I found somebody who wasn't scared of him, because I'd seen a lot of trainers, shall I say. Let me say, I saw a lot of ethical trainers, and they weren't willing to work with him, or they weren't able to work with him. So I was passed around a lot. I then found a balance trainer who was quite heavy-handed, but she weren't scared of him. So that's where my career started. Started off in the balance training community and moved on from there, really.
Wow. I didn't know that. I did not know about the Cane Corso at all.
Did you not? Hello. So that gets worse, that story. Jesus. So he's the reason I became a dog trainer. So I started training him in classes, and I had a bit of a knack for it. And then they asked me if I wanted to assist. And I was a very different character back then. I was different, you know. I was like, yeah, I'll give that a go. Like, I've got plenty of free time. So I came in, started assisting, then was given my own class, started doing my own classes. But I still couldn't move forward with this dog. You know, and I was following techniques where it was like choke chain on the dog, take his head off every time he goes over the threshold. And I was being told that he was a dominant dog and that he needed to be put in his place and all the rest of it. And he wasn't. He was terrified. However, I was also told that neutering would solve the solution. So I took him to the vet, and combination of having me with all the mistakes that I'd made, the dog himself, and then a vet that didn't really listen to me. So I was like an assistant dog trainer at this point, took him in, and I said to her, he needs a couple of minutes to calm down, because like I can tell he's all over the place at the moment. And she was like, yeah, no problem. And he was hiding behind me, but he had his front feet on the scales. And it was almost like what I'd said to her had gone in, but she didn't hear it, because she looked at him and went, while he's there, and she walked up and scooped up his under his stomach to move his back feet onto the scales. And when she let go of his back feet, without any kind of notification, he just span and bit her on the throat. Bosh! She span across the floor, claret coming out of her neck. And I was a different person back then. I was like all about my dog. I was like, they're going to kill him. Like, do I throw him out the window and run? Or, you know, how do I do it? And I sort of stood there trying to weigh up the situation. She eventually came back in, because she was, like, another vet came in, dragged her out. It was like a movie. Then they shut me in. I was like, shit. Yeah, she said, either we put this dog down or you go and see this particular person. And this particular person was very expensive, a expert in vicious animals, a veterinary behaviourist, a this, that, the other, and medicated the dog, put a classical conditioning protocol in place. But quite frankly, he was scared of both the dog and me. And back then, like, it was fair enough. So he offered no support. So I paid a large amount of money for an initial consultation, like a proper wedge. And then I couldn't get in touch with him for 6 months. And I needed support. I was desperate for support. I was like, just need help. I need somebody to help me. Finally, I got through to him by going via head office that had to contact somebody else. And he'd clearly been avoiding me. And he said, I'm really sorry. I've had lots of this, that, and the other happening. Why don't I come to your house and I'll do a consultation for free? And I was like, finally. So he came round and was there about 10 minutes before. He was like, we need to put this dog to sleep. And I was like, you need to get out of my house because I'm going to let the dog off the lead. And like, because I was ignorant back in the day. I had no idea. Like, some of the stuff that he did makes sense now. Some of the stuff that he did also makes me realise why there's such a divide in the community. I think he was my biggest error, mistake, fuck up, but also probably one of the biggest things that changed the course of my life. Like, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you without that dog.
It was great to spend that time getting to know his past more, because some of it I knew, but I really didn't know about the Cane Corso at all. I knew about Minky, I knew about the Dope, obviously about Fizz, but what I'd say is in this last year, watching him grow as a person has been really nice. Just, even from a distance over socials, you can tell he's grown a lot. And, I'm always happy for people who are investing time and energy into themselves so they can be, the better version of themselves. So randomly, that brings us on. We've done episode 3, we've done episode 4, and this is episode 5. Sharon Alton, a fellow Daxi specialist and runs Perfectly Polite Dachshunds.
I was training under another instructor and learning from her, and I kind of worshipped her because that's what I knew. There are other instructors there, but it was that balanced approach. We did use positive reinforcement, but just the same, we use yank and crank, and we would do, it was the alpha roll and bite the dogs on the ears if they bit you. She says, holding her head in her hands. Done that, been there, done that, not fun. But at the time, I thought that's what I had to do. That was the right way to do it, even if it went against my instincts. I wasn't a bully with my dogs. That's not how I was ever with them, but that was how I thought I had to be in order to modify behaviour. That's what I thought was the done thing. And it was then. It still is now, but in some circles. And I just wish maybe I'd jumped on a course sooner, but I didn't know it was there. Well, I lie. For 5 years, I probably didn't know it was there. And then it was listening to somebody else say, you're not ready, you're not ready, you're not ready. And it's only when I broke away from her and went in on my own that I went, I'm going to go and do it. And whilst I don't talk to the trainer that opened my eyes to the other world, he did open my eyes. And although I won't ever tell him this because I'm far too proud, I'm grateful. And if he ever listens to this, he probably knows who he is too. But I am grateful because without him pushing at me, I never would have pushed to seek answers. I never would have sought to improve. And when I realised there was a choice and a better way, that's where I grew. And so it's not a regret as such. There are things that I sit and cringe and go, oh my God, I did that. But I can't regret it because I didn't know any different. Now
you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. And until you can go, if someone tells you to do something, for God's sake, just jump on Google and look at it, or ask a peer, do you think this is a trust your gut instincts, follow your instincts. Don't try and be someone else. Train as you want to be treated. I wish I'd done that before, but I didn't know. I genuinely didn't know. So, and I was young. I was 18 when I started. So, and I sort of one of those cringe moments. I took on a young collie. It was my first aggressive dog. I was 20. I think.
And this was your own dog or someone you were working with?
My dog originally. It was someone that came to puppy classes, and he was biting them 20 odd times a day at 4 months old. There was a question mark over the treatment in the household, and again, it's another thing I sit here and cringe about. And he was doing an adult bite up the arms and anywhere else, but with puppy teeth, and causing a lot of damage. The vets neutered him then at 4 months old. So he come to classes from 3 months. He'd been showing that behaviour since he came. Puppy farm, Welsh puppy farm. And the vets neutered him at 4 months old. And so that'll fix the behaviour. And then at 4.5 months old, they said put him down. So he came to me. They rehomed him, and I said, "Well, I'd like to try. I've been working with him, and I've never had any issues with him. I'd like to try. I've never had an aggressive dog. I started class. I tried for a while to get away from Dachshunds because I've literally been born in the house with them. So for about 4 years, I escaped them. And I had 2 collies already, and I took on this little pup. And the first night, he started play biting in the middle of the night, and I sort of did it was the thumb on the tongue thing then that you used to do to stop them biting. Yeah, apparently it worked. Don't even ask.
Yeah. Back in the room.
Yeah, your thumb on their tongue and they stop biting. It doesn't work. But just saying. Anyway, he continued because it doesn't work. Biting my thumb. So I had my thumb still in his mouth and I put my hand in his collar, not knowing him at this point really. And it was my hand in the collar, not the thumb in his mouth, that made him clamp down on my thumb. And that was that contact. About at that time in the morning, I got up because this is what I was told to do when he bit. You know, I got up, I put a muzzle on. I was like, really, I don't want to do this, but if it helps him, he growled at me as I did it. I bit him on the ear because that's what I was told to do, because that's how you date when you're in the alpha. Sitting here cringing with a hand. My God, that poor dog, that poor puppy. He growled at me, so I bit him again. And I think it was 3 times, 4 times. And I'd not hard enough to draw blood or anything like that, but hard enough to make him uncomfortable. She says, still trying to justify the behaviour. And when he then relaxed and stopped growling at me, because that was absolutely everything to do with me biting his ears, nothing to do with the fact that I was leaning over him, pinning him to the floor, and scaring the shit out of him. I backed off, took the muzzle off and went back up, back to bed. He didn't then bite for 2 weeks. And again, that was absolutely everything to do with me biting him on the ear, nothing to do with the management and the training I was doing around it and the hard work I was putting in. And then in the car at a dog show, I went to give him a Kong and he bit me. So I bit him on the ear again because that's what you do. That's
it had worked for 2 weeks. In your brain, it had worked for 2 weeks. So this will work.
I'm going to do it again because that worked. And he didn't bite me again, So, and for a long time, it's because I bit him on the ear. I assumed authority over him. I was the alpha. I was the leader. That's what we were taught then. It was all about the bullying and submission and, the fact that my dog slept on the bed and, on the sofas. I didn't put in that part of the theory, but the bite on the ear I followed blindly. And he stayed with me till he was 10, and thankfully he forgave me for it. But and sadly I think a lot of his issues were pain related, to be honest with you. I do wonder if there was a seizure issue, but again, that long ago they didn't really know much about anything with like seizures and like partial seizures and that. But yeah, I had him until he was 10, and then I think the pain then started coming back, arthritis. He'd done his cruise shit and stuff. He was absolutely bonkers as a dog. We ended up nose to nose with him snarling at me when I was grooming him one day, and I was like, okay, the painkillers aren't working, mate. I think it's time. And that was probably the hardest decision I've had to make with the euthanasia call, but it was the right one. But yeah, he taught me a lot, that dog. He really did. He grew to sleep in under my son's cot and everything. He grew to be a wonderful dog. Couldn't be trusted around dogs he didn't know. The integration into the household was, you're going to get bitten on the nose if you go in his space, but if he was caving. But yeah, he's the one I probably have that biggest regret over. Why the hell did I not... Why didn't I listen? Why did I listen to other people and not trust my instincts?
Here and Sharon, since recording this podcast, I've had a few long chats about the dog world and things like that, and I would love to have her back on at some point. In fact, I don't think there's a guest that I wouldn't have back on, if I'm really honest. I've enjoyed all of them, but I did and do still love how open and honest she was about her regrets and things that she's done in the past, because I think that the more open and honest we can all be, the better. It helps others. And I hope that some of my solo episodes, when I've talked about Bella, Fern, Mizzle even, my more difficult dogs, that's helped, bring some comfort to you as a listener, that you're not on your own and that we all mess up, or that we all experience struggles with dogs at times, and that it can affect us a lot emotionally and affect a lot of other parts of our lives. So yeah, thank you very much to Sharon for being so open. I had to, of course, include an episode with my bestie, Lil. This is the first episode that she was on with me, which is episode 17, where we were recapping on a dog trainers seminar event that we'd been to, Dog X, that day. But there's a few chats in here, and I'll let you listen. Lily Abbott, who happens to be my bestie with me, we are sat here in our PJs, and we've just been to a dog conference. Lily is a fellow KCI trainer in Companion Dog and Good Citizen Dog Scheme, and also Assistance Dogs. She's a fellow ABTC ATI with the TCBTS, like me. I'll start off with the 3 undercover Labradors, who are actually German Shepherd cross German Pointers. They are about 12 years old now. Yeah, I'll have to actually check. That's really bad. Sorry to interrupt, but I am always, years ago when we met, I was always the one who kind of wound her up and said they're Labradors, because they look like Labradors.
They do.
And she was always like, they're not Labradors, they're German Shepherds cross German Pointers. And I was like, yeah, but they're Labradors. And she was so against it, to the point where loads of people would say to her, like, even Labrador breeders would be like, yeah, they're Labradors, I know. Which they're not. She knows this, she bred them by accident, it wasn't planned. And I wound her up over the years calling them Labradors, and now she calls them Labradors herself.
Yeah, Richard still calls them the undercover Labradors, but yeah, they do look like Labradors. So yes, for the dog training people on this, you can all cringe that I have 3 siblings. I've had siblings before, I probably will again in the future. It's never planned. It's just the way things happen. One came back, there's a whole story too. It wasn't just a irresponsible breeding. Then we have my absolute Egypt of a shepherd, who's a black, long-coated shepherd called Ezekiel, who is my previous assistance dog, who is now retired. And we might have to do a podcast about him at some point, because that's a whole story.
Yeah, you've got loads of fuck-ups around him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And then I have my absolute twat bag of a sausage currently lying between my legs. That's going to sound really wrong. Which was actually bred by Sarah.
Shit breeder.
Yeah, absolutely terrible breeder. I mean, I've tried to get a refund and she just said no.
No.
Yeah, these puppy farmers are terrible, aren't they? He was just like raised in a shed, didn't know who his parents were.
To be clear, Lil pretty much moved in for the 8 weeks before she took him home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was even there for his conception.
You were.
Was that involved? But no, he's my current assistance dog, and he is my absolute heart and soul. I love him to bits. But my first dachshund, my first very small dog, and I'm really liking hounds.
Yes.
Like I say, it's a terrier turned down a notch.
Yeah.
And I'm a terrier lady.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's all good. But yes, the 5 dogs currently, hopefully a 6th to be added soon. But we shall see. How we never met, I don't know.
I don't know, because we've still got so many mutual friends.
And mutual places we've been at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Randomly, how we met was, I did a win my book kind of share and like thing on when I wrote the first book, which is, oh God, my brain. Another book, thanks. Another book, which was all about kind of bringing Ripple in as the 6th dog into the household. And Lily won it. And she messaged me a few times after, very complimentary messages, and we got chatting. And then things went quiet for a bit. I think that was like November-ish time. Yeah. And then we both applied, not knowing, but we both applied to be on the Good Sits Gold team, or at least for the tryouts, for Crufts the following year. And the tryouts are like early January, or they were at that point. And I'd not long since had received the news that my dad had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I'll be honest, I got up that morning for the tryouts, and it was like, I didn't want to go. But something in me was like, just do it, just go. And I got there, and I remember there was like, I was driving a tiny little car, because I was only taking a taxi, I wasn't going to take the van. And I know from both Lil and her husband that they were both like, what the hell is going to turn up in that? Because it was a tiny little, like, convertible, like, old mini style size.
2-seater, no boot.
Yeah. And I'd kind of like earmarked that I knew that Lil was there, because we'd all been added to this group, I think. I knew that Lil was there. And she went out for a vape, as she does, and I followed her out at one point. And I kind of come round a bit by then. I was like, oh, I'm here. I'm just going to give it my best go. And I went up to her and I says, hi, are you all right? And she looked at me, gone out, like, who the fuck are you? And then...
That was really rich.
You were. And I pointed down and I went, this is Ripple. And she went, oh, and then
and just completely went nuts over Ripple and was just like, I don't know who you are and I don't care who you are. Give me the dog.
Because she'd read the whole book about Ripple. And even though we'd both got on the team and that, it wasn't really until a good few months after I'd seen that she'd posted that she was driving a pony, and obviously I carriage drive as well. So I messaged her and I said, "You drive?" And she was like, "Oh, yeah, I drive my friends, usually at Christmas, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "You need to come on a drive." And then we went on this drive and we got absolutely soaking wet. But we were out for a good couple of hours and that was it then. You know, like, we are literally joined at the hip, even though we live at the opposite ends of the country. But yeah, we get on like a house on fire. Anyway, unless you've got anything else to add to that story.
No, just, I'm really sorry. I was really rude to you.
I really was. I was not in the best of moods. But I think going on quite a deeper level for me, what she said... She started to, we all know, or at least we as dog trainers know, that the average dog is equivalent to a 2 or 3 year old child, cognitively or mentally. And she also addressed attachment. Some of my background is, I've done courses in therapy and things like that, and emotional education and things to do with humans more than anything else. And I've been through a lot of therapy myself. And when she was talking about attachment, I've done a lot of studying in attachment, and I know you have too. I mean, you did a lot. I mean, is your degree in psychology? Yeah. So Lil's degree to do with her work is in psychology, so she is definitely the lady to talk to. But what really hit home to me was the fact that she was essentially saying, not just, we know this about dogs being like a toddler, but always a toddler throughout their lives, and about frustration and things like that. We know that toddlers like to kick off and have a paddy and all of this because they can't deal with frustration, and we teach dogs to deal with frustration because we have longer years with them being a toddler than a toddler is. But the attachment side really hit home to me, and I actually started thinking more about how, I've been very aware of the attachment side, and I was, shall we say, rejected by my parents at 3, and went to live with my grandparents at that age, and that's obviously had effects, and part of the reason why I've been in therapy and things like that. But then thinking about it in dog terms, I'd not really put it into those, like the attachment side. I'd not really put it into those terms. In some ways I was thinking, well, there's no wonder I am so protective over my dogs and that attachment to me and my attachment to them, because it's all about safety and all about feeling that safety and secure attachment. Because I'm fully aware I'm probably overprotective of my dogs, but it's also a reason why I decided to never have children, because I realised that I never could, this world is not a nice place. And this might be hard for some of the listeners to hear, but this is my view because of my experiences, that I couldn't knowingly bring a child into this world in the state that it's currently in, because I know I couldn't protect them. When with dogs, I am so hyper vigilant, and probably too much in some ways. I mean, what are your thoughts on that kind of part of the...
Yeah, absolutely, but I'm going to come back to that because I've got a thought in my head. If I don't say it now, I'm going to lose it, and I forgot to speak to you about it because it came to me at the time. So my area that I love to work on is teenagers, as you know. And if you think about it, having worked with children in the past, 2-year-olds at 2 years old, that's where a human child will start to say no. They don't understand what no means, but they're testing out what no means. By 3, they've learnt that, and they start to understand that resilience, and they have a choice in what they're doing. So if you then relate that to a dog, especially with early neutering, at the point that they are a teenager, which is 2 years old, as a human child, you're locking that dog into that no stage. They don't understand what no means. They're just going, no, I'm not doing it. So for me, it was really important, actually, because I was like, hang on, if we early neuter, we're locking that dog into the naughty 2-year-olds, and we all know about, terrible twos and all of that. So, for example, my big boy, Lazarus, he was neutered at 5 months old. Now, he's 12, 13 this year. I didn't have that knowledge back then. I'd never do that now. But I've locked him into, well, basically being a teenager for the rest of his life, and he's not fully matured, so you can see from his face and his body, he's not built out. But it really just made me think, because I was like, hang on a second, so we're neutering these dogs early, and we're keeping them in the teenage stage, but we're also locking them into the equivalent of a 2-year-old, which is the terrible twos, which is why this, if you don't work through these issues with teenagers, you get dogs with behavioural problems, whereas if we leave it a little bit later, you might still have behavioural problems, but you
tend to have a dog with a little bit more resilience because they now know, actually, I don't want to do that, but yes, I'll do that. And actually, I'll do that different behaviour. So instead of jumping up, yes, I'll happily sit. Yeah. But then, and then it went on to the attachment side, and I'm the same as you, as I'm ridiculously overprotective of my dogs. And I've had to really learn not to be, especially with Ignatius, to give him that chance. But I think absolutely the psychology of it, you know, you're going to be overprotective. And I'm the same as you. I never wanted kids because I was like, hang on a second, I couldn't protect myself in my own life. Agreed. And if I can't protect myself, I'm not going to be able to protect someone else. Yeah. And this is a person. And that sounds terrible because obviously I want to protect my dogs, but I think it's easier with dogs as well because we have bred them to be biddable, you know, which obviously we'll come on to later with one of the other sessions, but we have so much control over their lives. When you don't with a child. And I think my biggest fear would be that kind of 13 to 18 age of not being able to protect them having their own mind, wanting to go out into the world. I just couldn't face that. I'd never be able to forgive myself if something happened.
Because, there's too much out there. There's too much risk. I'm totally with you on that one.
But then she also, and this really broke my heart, and honestly, I don't know how I didn't end up in tears, because she was saying, dogs are as attached to us as toddlers, and you get that completely. And then she's like, so think about the dogs that are then given up to rescue. And there are very good reasons. I'm not saying that's wrong. I've had to do it in the past. But it nearly broke me, because I was like, yeah, they are that attached to us. And then all of a sudden, they're like, where have we gone? You know,
because the same parts of the brain... They did an fMRI on quite a few. The same parts of the brain light up with the happy hormones, without going into all the terminology, that a baby does when it sees its parents, who it's most attached to, and vice versa. A dog's brain lights up in the same way as a baby does when it sees its owner. That is what said, and a lot of it today was very much about what the scientific studies are. This is not just us talking about, so-and-so said this. Yeah. It's the science behind it. But at the end of the day, if that's what the science is saying, we need to start to kind of question even our own thoughts and our own beliefs. And that's what CPD is all about.
I think you'll agree that we definitely need to have Lily back again, and that we need that Ezekiel episode to hear all about him, which I keep nagging her, but I will carry on nagging her. And the next dog, if you're wondering, for Lily is going to be another Dachshund. It's going to be a bitch, and she's going to be called Helga. I've just had to message her because I forgot, and it's really bad because she's already started nesting and buying all the things for Helga. Even though Helga, we don't even know where Helga's coming from. She's probably not even being, conceived right now, but I'm all for that, for nesting and preparing and visualising what next pup is going to be. And of course I had to put a bit of light-hearted stuff in there after the heavy regrets and stuff. Okay, so next we move on to Michelle Pulio, episode 32. Michelle worked for Guide Dogs for the Blind in America for 42 years. She's been responsible for bringing reward-based clicker training internationally to the guide dog field, and I'm sure to assistance dogs as well.
When you say mistakes, because I had so many years, 1970 I started training, obviously traditional, and I was very lucky to have good people teaching me. So, I look at myself even early on as a good traditional trainer, but as the years went by, not wanting to be so harsh, wanting to move away from the rock'em sock'em type of jerk release stuff. But I'm drawn more, when you ask me that, to that period of time, because it's so interesting how you look up to the people who teach you something and have experience, and that also means you trust them. So you put your trust in this person who tells you to jerk harder, on the dog, and for some reason you don't even think about the fact of there being another way, to do that, because this person's successful, they've done it for a long time. And I kind of feel like Ken Ramirez does about back when he was doing work with marine animals using positive reinforcement. And then when he went to the dog community to volunteer for a guide dog school, he was told, this is how you have to do it. And it's so interesting how even Ken Ramirez back then said, I guess with dogs, you have to do it this way.
You have to show them who's boss, obviously.
Exactly. It's like with dogs, this is how you train dogs. And here he was already using positive reinforcement. And it took him a long time to go, wait a minute. But for me, it was a very long journey in traditional training. And unfortunately, a lot of the people I was around in the 1970s were extremely harsh traditional trainers. And it tapped into my questioning of, I don't want to have to do that. Is there a better way to do it? And so all through the 90s and the 90s, I worked really hard to improve our training program at Guide Dogs and improve my own training. It still was traditional training, but it was a lot nicer traditional training. And it really focused on quality praise, relationship, touch, voice, whatever the dog would respond to. No food at all. A little bit of playing, interacting playing, not using implements, like a toy or something like that. But every time I was around one of these trainers in the 70s and the 80s especially, and I'm watching them train dogs and get the job done very harshly, kind of look at those as moments where I knew that's a mistake. Being able to watch it in your face is like, I didn't have to do it, is what I'm saying. It's like,
it's different. Yeah.
Watching it was recognizing that it's just not right. Not even using words like ethical and stuff like that. Just, yeah, back then you never heard the word ethical, but just the questioning of that is wrong. And so when I would come upon a challenge, it would enter my mind to try that technique I saw. Right? It would like make me go, oh, maybe I should do what he did when that happened. And then I would catch myself as I'm doing it and realizing that it's a mistake. So your question draws me back to the old days of mistakes. To me, were really blatantly just unfair training to the dog. And I'm not teaching. Right. I almost didn't like the word training anymore because that's what, of course, we were called. We're trainers. I like the idea of calling it, can I teach this animal something? Can I do something that way? So in traditional training, there's way too many things that, you could just pile up a list of, don't do that anymore. Never do that again. No. That didn't work. Right. So those experiences were a lot more numerous and I would say blatant. But interestingly enough, when I started with positive reinforcement training in around 2000, I was so excited about this tool and the fact that I was seeing this animal actually learn something, not kind of being coerced, forced into doing something. But I'm remembering a mistake very clearly. I had no experience with negative punishment. As a traditional trainer, you don't. There's no way to have experience with it because you don't have something the animal has been enjoying to withhold to punish them, right? And so I'd heard all about, removing reinforcement when the animal isn't working well or something like that. I'd never even considered doing it. I didn't really know how to do it. I wasn't like seeing instances where, I guess I could use that negative punishment thing. And one day I was training my young Aussie, Listo, who became a really spectacular performer. And he was doing this behavior of backing up and he had a long distance back away. And he was just doing it really slow. There was like no real spark to it that moment, right? And so all of a sudden I got this idea in my head, let me try negative punishment. And so I walked over to him and escorted him with my finger through the collar and put him in a crate. And I got my other dog out and I played with it a second. And then I put that dog up and I got him back out and oh my God, it was like he was going backwards at 90 miles an hour. And I thought, I've discovered the magic.
This is the answer to all your problems.
Here's the magic, right? Wow, negative punishment. How cool is that? What I didn't stop to think about is it's very powerful. So be very careful. And I made a huge mistake with it with that same dog. It was 2 times in his whole career I applied negative punishment. That one, which of course worked out really nice for the moment. And the next one I did, negative punishment, was when he didn't listen to me when I called him. We have a long driveway. And when cars start coming up that drive, we didn't used to have a gate down there. It's very worrisome about the dog's safety, right? So it's, the whole recall thing in the driveway area is always important. He was like 8 years old or something. He knows how to recall. And when I called him, he didn't come. And of course, then I'm freaking out about a car coming up the driveway. So I'm running, and I grabbed him, and grabbed the collar and pulled him off to the side. And I was just so mad, but I just kind of like acted like he wasn't there. He started screaming. You would think I was hitting him or something like that. Emotionally, it just crushed him. It was like I had no idea that removing my attention could have that sort of impact. But he was also reading into how upset I was at the same time, because worrisome.
Well, they do, don't they? Yep.
Oh yeah. So my adrenaline was really high. His adrenaline was high because the reason he didn't come is he was barking at the car, right? So his adrenaline was up too. And I thought I was catching myself, preventing myself from doing something traditional by like jerking on him or something like that. I just removed him off to the side, and then I decided I would ignore him for a few seconds, right? Negative punishment, take all your, I couldn't believe he started screaming. I mean, it's like I looked down and I'm like, is something wrong? It was all emotional. He was just so upset. And I'd never even heard the dog peep like that before. And boy, that was a big mistake. That day, I was totally accepting that negative punishment is something that is a tool, and it's a tool available to positive reinforcement trainers, because when you have a history of reinforcement, removing reinforcement can be very powerful. But be very careful about that power, because it really is powerful. And traditional trainers have a hard time understanding that because they've never had it as a tool.
No.
So, they haven't had the ability to say, oh, I have this other thing that's available to me in my training. And so I've become a much more adept at using negative punishment when it's appropriate. And it's still a very powerful tool, but I have great respect for that power.
It's not your go-to.
No, it is not.
One of the big things that I took from this talk was that I'd never really thought about it, even though I did used to use negative methods before I was a professional. I'd never really considered the fact that with negative punishment, i.e. taking something that the dog desires away to decrease a behaviour, I never considered the fact that negative or punishment or balanced trainers had never had that to work with. They'd never had something that the dog desires in the first place to remove. And that was quite a big, awakening for me. It just never really crossed my mind. But I genuinely enjoyed that chat. Okay, so that's it for your clips. There are many more conversations that I've really, really enjoyed, but this episode would have ended up being 5 hours long, and you can go and listen to the episodes. So, on that note, the pod is obviously, this is going to carry on. However, it's going to be in a slightly different format. The aim at the minute is I'm going to have a bit of a break over the summer, and I will be back in September. And then after that, you will get monthly episodes, which will be in a longer format, which will be a bit of me, catch up what's been going on, any thoughts or, realizations that I've had since the previous episode. And then hopefully there'll be an interview with someone each time. Some of them will be returning guests. Hopefully we'll get some new guests as well. As I've said before, Claire Lawrence has agreed to come back on. I've got a bit of a plan for me and 2 others to have a bit of an informal chat, which will be recorded at some point kind of September, October time. And the aim is that I'm going to try just monthly, September, October, November, December, and see where I'm at the end of the year. I want to keep this going. I absolutely love it. We're at nearly 4,000 downloads, which, for little old me that decided, sod it, I'm going to do a podcast a year ago, I'm really chuffed with that. And thank you all for even just one listen. And if you're only just finding the podcast now, at least you can binge on 49 other episodes, and you can hear more about all of those talks that you've heard about in this episode as well. So that's kind of the plan moving forward. I'm going to be going away in a few weeks' time with Billy on the pony, on a carriage driving holiday, and then we've got competitions with the team coming up, and my birthday and things like that. So I've got loads of stuff going on, and I just wanted to have a bit of a breather so I could really kind of, reimagine the podcast how it should be. But I hope you've enjoyed it. Please share it with a friend. If you've got dog-owning friends who are struggling, or the dog professionals, send them the link to this podcast. It makes all the difference, and it kind of G's me on when I'm thinking, I've got too much to do and I can't do it. When I want to do it, I really do. So yeah, and I've got some other stuff kind of lurking in the background as well, but hopefully I'll be able to fill you in on that. September. I won't give you a date for September, so you best have followed or, make sure that you are subscribing to the podcast so you get that notification on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever it is that you listen to when when it launches the next episode. So yeah, thank you very much. It's been an amazing year. You guys have made it, and I will be back in September. Take care. Bye.